Sarah, thank you very much for letting me come into your class and to see not an easy class.
No.
Yes, but they have a broad range, don't they, in terms of language ability, and a broad range also in terms of behaviour.
Yeah.
How did you manage that this afternoon? Because they were all engaged.
I think from the very sort of start of my relationship with them, I built up a very strong relationship. So, you know, when I first came across the class, I was quite sort of strict with them. They knew my expectations, and then through that we built like a really nice relationship. And if they don't understand something, I think that they feel they can talk to me about it, or they can say it, and I'm not going to sort of tell them off or anything like that. We built up a really good relationship, and I think you know, establishing expectations all the time.
Yes, and several of them said, if we don't understand, Miss tells us, or she gives us the ideas, or she helps us to analyse.
Yeah.
So you obviously do build up those skills.
Yeah.
And one stage, I was talking to several students about, do they find this hard or easy? And several said they found it easy.
Right.
And I said, why? They said, well, because over the past, we've done this quite a lot, and we've learned how to do it.
Yeah.
So this is really easy for us.
Right, yeah.
Did you expect them to be able to get through as well as they did today?
I thought that some of the things that we've done, I think they recognise certain features, so I always use a word explosion to analyse language with them. So I've kind of, whatever text we look at, we use the same thing so that they realise that their skills are transferable. So rather than just having, we look at this text and we do this, I do it across all the text. So they were kind of trained, but what I decided to do was try and develop it. So I think perhaps what they were doing is thinking, I recognise this, so I'm comfortable with it, but I do think it still pushed them a little bit. I perhaps wasn't expecting them to give as good verbal responses as they were sometimes doing.
Yes. When you were getting the verbal responses, I found it interesting that you majored on certain of the students. There was one of the Josh Jones, wasn't it? He had 9 responses.
Right. Okay.
And Jake, who was engaged, even despite his behaviour, was engaged well, and he had made 8 responses, Abib made 6, and so there were quite a lot of response from those students. Do you think that helped or hindered the others? I
think sometimes it does help in the sense that they perhaps do have the ideas, but that group suffers massively with confidence in sort of saying it in front of everyone else. I think that sometimes it helps them because I then don't just let them answer, but I try and make them develop their answers. So I don't just go, okay, that was a really good answer. So we kind of talk about why and pull more out. I think probably, I think through my nerves and things like that, I perhaps didn't pick on the ones that I usually sort of do to bring it out of them. I think that's kind of the nature of when you're perhaps being observed and you're a bit nervous about.
That's understandable.
But no, I think it works both ways. I think sometimes they are a good sort of role model of you pulling out that answer, but then also you should try and verbally challenge the other ones that perhaps I think you're worried of them just going, I don't know. And stopping because they're worried or nervous that they'll get it wrong.
I think Maria was a good example. When you asked her a couple of times and pushed her a little more, she had lots of good answers. And but she never volunteered.
No.
But she was a classic example of those who lacked confidence and could do it.
Maria's an individual who very rarely puts her hand up, but I can kind of see from her facial expression, she'll sit up and she'll look at me as if to say, Miss, I've kind of got an answer, but I don't really want to put my hand up. And she is very much like that. So I think that, again, building up that relationship.
And it's exactly that came through. Your passion, your commitment, but also your technical expertise. That was coming through, and you were getting the response you were getting. Because far from being the potentially difficult class, they engaged well in this. And only at the end were they really sort of struggling, some of them, to just sort of stay focused. But that's because they worked so hard. And they remain engaged and motivated and enjoyed a range of things that you did. That was very positive. And you structured the lesson well, step by step by step. Is that the way you often do things? Yeah, but
purely because I think if I sort of said, right, these are the things we've got to do today, we've got to manage to hit these success criteria, and I kind of just gave them stuff to do, I think that they then would would not engage with it, and I think they'd become kind of, I can't do this, I'm not even going to try, because they do suffer with their confidence in it. Although they might be quite bubbly and quite loud, I think that's quite often a bit of a front for the fact that they feel they're quite lacking in their skills, especially in English, because it's so difficult to pinpoint certain skills, I think, sometimes.
But you did the very reverse for them.
Yeah.
You actually stepped those skills well and made them realise what they were doing.
Yeah.
Well done. That was extremely well
Thank
done. And they enjoyed it, they engaged in it, and they were able to do it despite the wide language range. We have what, from reading age 8 through to reading age 13.
Yeah.
They were able to do that, and some of that text was very complex.
Yeah.
How did you achieve that?
I think I've over the sort of past term, I've employed a number of literacy strategies. So like in the books at the minute, they've got a glossary of terms. We did a non-fiction text. It was actually really challenging. It was from The Guardian, but I gave it to them anyway, and I just did a whole lesson of, right, we don't understand all these words, so what should we do? We didn't have any dictionaries, and what we did was used reading strategies such as reading around the word to try and figure out what it was or what it sounds like, or has it got other words in it. So I've kind of hopefully embedded some of those strategies within the students, so they don't always feel like they have to ask me what stuff means. They can try and figure it out for themselves. And I want them to be a bit more independent in that sense. And
you're setting up the skills and the knowledge to move on to the next stage has been quite crucial, was crucial in today's lesson.
Yeah.
I think that was a good lesson. And what I'd like to do now is to just explore with you, how could that be an outstanding lesson?
Okay.
What would we need to do to improve it? So if you wanted to improve that, really make it an outstanding lesson, what would you do?
I think I knew straight away after the lesson had finished what I needed to do, and I think that was probably look at something more specific within the skill set, perhaps, so I knew that we were all on this one and then we could move up to the next one, rather than trying to hit further and further up. Perhaps pick one and we'll do one activity and spend longer on it. And then I also thought that perhaps bringing in a little bit of creativity, maybe have sort of more sort of group work, maybe getting them sitting in groups, and the word explosion, perhaps having them it printed out really big and they all kind of work around it and add ideas to it. As soon as I'd done it, I realised afterwards that getting them perhaps talking, discussing more in groups would have been better.
It certainly would have consolidated some of the things they were doing, wouldn't it? In smaller steps. And would that have been good for the most able in the group?
I think perhaps the most able could have been challenged there by me giving them sort of criteria that they had to hit, and they could still have done that. Maybe they could have had either, perhaps they could have gone in a group on their own and had the more challenging bit of the word explosion, the extension bit that we didn't really get to. They could have done that then, and they could have progressed higher up those up their skills. So yeah, a bit more of creativity and having them moving around. And
so the lower attainers could have, if with smaller steps better substantiated, they might have got more there, and the higher attainers with more challenge moved on just that little bit more. That might have been helped also, I think, with assessment. In the books, your assessment is good and it's close and technical. And you're giving them their levels. Well done on doing all of that. When you were doing the assessment in the class, much of it was oral.
It was,
and in the class, they weren't all chipping in there. Or, for instance, if you had that section where you had the level 5 and level 6 text, two lads contributed to whether they thought it was level 5 or level 6, and then we moved on.
Everyone should have.
At least you needed to know where they were, but you did get them to assess where they were and do a self-assessment, self-reflection on the written material, and you've got that written material, so you can go back and look at that. So a good lesson, and with students well engaged, making good progress, and if you want to move it on to be outstanding, I agree with you. If there was greater differentiation between most and least able, consolidation and more creative, moving those forward, I think we could well be there. I wish you well as you move them forward.
Thank you very much.
The demanding class, very varied ability, and you engage them exceptionally well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in there.
Okay.
Thank you.